Somewhere in an ordinary house, on an ordinary morning, a dog watches its owner pick up a set of keys. Nothing dramatic happens, no words are spoken, and yet, in that instant, something changes inside the animal's body. Heart rate rises, muscles tighten. A cascade of stress hormones begins to move through the bloodstream. All of this triggered by nothing more than the sound of metal against a table. For decades, we assumed this was simple. We called it clinginess. We called it bad behavior. We punished the chewed furniture and the destroyed door frames without asking the question underneath all of it. What if the dog isn't misbehaving at all? What if we are witnessing something closer to grief, compressed into minutes, repeated day after day, hidden inside an animal we thought we understood completely? Because the truth is, the closer scientists look at what happens when a dog is left alone, the less it resembles disobedience, and the more it resembles something unsettling and deeply familiar. And by the end of this investigation, you may never look at your front door or your dog's eyes as you walk through it the same way again. To understand what separation truly means to a dog, we first need to understand what a dog's brain is built for. And that story begins not in a living room, but in the forests and grasslands where the wolf once lived. Wolves are cooperative animals. Their survival depends on the pack, on shared vigilance, shared hunting, shared warmth. A wolf separated from its group is a wolf in danger. Over hundreds of thousands of years, natural selection sharpened a nervous system exquisitely tuned to detect the presence or the absence of its social unit. Then came domestication, and something extraordinary happened.
As dogs diverged from wolves, researchers observed a strange amplification of sociability. Studies on domesticated foxes bred purely for tameness revealed that selecting for friendliness accidentally reshaped an entire suite of traits, hormone systems included. Something similar appears to have unfolded in dogs. Their attachment systems, already present in the ancestral wolf, seem to have been intensified, redirected, and in many cases, aimed squarely at us. This is where the first real mystery begins. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, researchers led by Josef Topol in Hungary asked a provocative question. Could dogs form attachment bonds with humans in the same structural way human infants form attachment bonds with their caregivers? To test this, they adapted a famous experiment originally designed for one-year-old children called the Strange Situation Test. In the original version, developed by psychologist Mary Ainsworth, an infant is placed in an unfamiliar room with their caregiver. The caregiver leaves briefly, a stranger enters, the caregiver returns. Researchers observe how the child responds, not just to the departure, but to the reunion. Children with secure attachment show distress when the caregiver leaves and are calmed, genuinely calmed, by their return. It is one of the most replicated findings in developmental psychology. When Topol's team ran a modified version of this exact protocol on dogs, the results were startling. Dogs behaved remarkably like securely attached toddlers. They explored more when their owner was present. They showed clear distress behaviors when left with a stranger. And upon reunion, they didn't just approach the owner, they used them the way a child uses a parent, as what psychologists call a secure base, a kind of psychological safe harbor from which to explore an uncertain world. Think about what that actually means. It suggests that somewhere in the architecture of a dog's mind exists a bond structurally similar to the one between a parent and a very young child. Not identical, not equally complex, but built from the same evolutionary and neurological materials. And this bond appears to run on some of the same chemistry. Research led by Miho Nagasawa and Takefumi Kikusui in Japan found that when dogs and their owners gaze into each other's eyes, both species show a rise in oxytocin, the very hormone involved in the bond between a mother and an infant. Owners whose dogs held their gaze longer showed larger oxytocin increases, and so did the dogs themselves. It is one of the few documented cases of a genuine hormonal feedback loop operating between two different species, which raises an uncomfortable question. If connection with us is written this deeply into a dog's chemistry, what must disconnection feel like? So what happens physiologically in the moments after that bond is interrupted? Researchers have measured this directly using cortisol, the primary stress hormone in mammals. In multiple studies, dogs left alone show measurable spikes in cortisol within minutes. Heart rate variability shifts. Some dogs vocalize, some pace. Some simply lie by the door, eyes fixed on the space where their person disappeared. In more severe cases, what veterinary behaviorists now classify as separation-related distress, the physiological response resembles panic more than boredom. This is not an animal that is merely inconvenienced. This is a nervous system responding as though something essential has been lost. And here is where the documentary takes an unexpected turn, because the story doesn't end with distress, it gets stranger. Some studies tracking cortisol levels over longer separations found something researchers didn't fully expect. In certain dogs, physiological stress markers began to decline after a period of time alone, even while outward behavioral signs of anxiety, whining, scratching, pacing, continued. In other words, the body and the behavior didn't always agree. Some researchers have proposed this might reflect a kind of exhaustion or resignation response, echoed in some human psychological literature on prolonged distress. Others urge caution, noting that cortisol alone is an incomplete window into emotional experience, and that we simply don't yet know what internal state accompanies that decline. This is what is of the science. We can measure the hormone, we cannot yet read the feeling behind it. If you've made it this far into the hidden emotional world of dogs, and you want to keep exploring the science behind the animals we think we already know, this is exactly the kind of investigation this channel is built around. There is another layer to this mystery, one that involves a sense most of us barely think about: smell. A dog's olfactory system is almost unimaginably more sensitive than ours, with hundreds of millions more receptors and a proportionally vast area of brain devoted to processing scent. Some researchers, including cognitive scientist Alexandra Horowitz, have proposed a fascinating hypothesis. If humans experience time partly through vision, watching a scene change, a shadow move, perhaps dogs experience the passage of time partly through scent, watching a smell fade. Under this hypothesis, your presence doesn't just disappear when you close the door, it lingers, and then it slowly, molecule by molecule, dissolves. If true, your absence isn't a single moment, it is a scent that is dying in real time. This remains a hypothesis, not a settled fact, but it offers a haunting possible answer to a question that has puzzled owners for years. Why does a dog often seem more distressed at the 20-minute mark than at the 2-minute mark? Perhaps because in a very real sensory sense, we are still leaving the room again and again for as long as the smell of us remains. Not every dog experiences this the same way, and that too is part of the mystery. Research into individual differences has found that early life experiences dramatically shape adult attachment security. Puppies exposed to gradual, predictable periods of separation during critical developmental windows often grow into adults with more resilient coping responses. Puppies who never experience brief, safe separations, or who experience chaotic and unpredictable ones, appear more vulnerable to developing intense separation-related distress later in life. There are also documented differences across breeds, and even among individuals within the same breed, hinting that this is not a simple switch, but a spectrum shaped by genetics, temperament, and history, much like attachment style in humans themselves. Some studies have also pointed to household composition itself as a factor. Which brings us as the only pet in a home are sometimes reported to show higher rates of separation-related distress than dogs living alongside another animal companion, though researchers are careful to note that correlation here is not the same as proof of a simple cause. Rescue dogs, particularly those who experienced multiple rehoming events or unstable early environments, also appear overrepresented in clinical cases of separation anxiety, suggesting that the wound, if that is even the right word, may be less about the dog's breed and more about its personal history of loss. Which brings us to the most profound comparison of all. In human psychology, the effects of early attachment patterns can echo for a lifetime, shaping how a person handles distance, trust, and reunion in every relationship that follows. Some researchers now believe something structurally similar may be true for dogs, that the way a puppy learns to tolerate absence in its first months may quietly shape the emotional texture of every goodbye for the rest of its life. Personally, I find this one of the most humbling discoveries in the whole of behavioral science. We spent so long assuming that only humans carried this kind of relational memory forward through time, and yet here, inside an animal sleeping at the foot of a bed in millions of homes around the world, may live a nervous system quietly shaped by the very same forces that shape us. So what is separation anxiety really? It is not simply bad behavior. It is not simply an inconvenience to be trained away without understanding.
Beneath the chewed shoe and the scratched door may lie something closer to an ancient biological alarm, inherited from a wolf that could not survive alone, intensified by thousands of years selecting for a creature that would need us the way a child needs a parent, and expressed through a sensory world so foreign to our own that we are only beginning to imagine what it must feel like from the inside. We still don't know exactly what a dog experiences emotionally in that moment. We may never know with certainty,